in this presentation, we want to talk about integrity, and we want to talk about it in some ways that might be familiar to you and in some ways that might not be. Lots of people are talking about integrity right now, and that's a good thing. But when I hear those conversations, I often think about the funeral service for my grandfather, who passed away just a few years ago. And we all gathered at First Christian Church of Paradise, Texas. And my mom and I stood in the receiving line, and people came by and they shook our hands. These were small town Texas ranchers and their families, and just said Homer Steele was a man of integrity. And we heard that over and over and over. And I mean, I knew my grandfather. I wasn't sure exactly where that was coming from, except that what they were trying to say was, Homer Steele was a good old boy. Homer Steele fit into our community, and he did some good things, and we liked him. And we want to take the idea of integrity a little deeper and a little further than that.
Yeah, and so where we want to start is in the beginning of the Bible. We want to talk about integrity from in light of who God is. And so the first thing we know in the Bible about God is that God creates. And not only does God create, God creates the world. He creates everything that we know in the world. And God doesn't do that by wishing or thinking or hoping. But what God does is God creates the world with God's Word. And we think that is really important because the first thing that we know about us is that we're created in God's image. And so if God creates with God's Word, then it would be the kind of the next thing that would come from that is that part of what it means for us to be fully human and to live into the design of what it means to be human is that we join our word with God's word in helping to create the world that we live in.
And I just want to lift up that idea of design, that we're saying that integrity, which comes from a word where we also get integer and integrate, has this idea of wholeness and has this idea of wholeness in the sense of design. And so if you'll just stick with that for a minute and then let us take that piece by piece. We think that'll be really helpful.
So as we think about integrity in our conversations with you guys, what we want to do is ask you to think about two definitions that we use. And we want you to actually interact with them, kind of draw them to yourself, wonder about them, be curious about them, have conversations, do the like, how is this like and how is it different from the way that I normally use that the word integrity. The two definitions that we would use is that integrity is workability and integrity is giving and keeping your word. What would you say about workability?
Yeah, so I think we get this idea from engineering, right? That things have integrity when they work the way they were designed to. So a foundation of a building has integrity if it can support the building. A bridge has integrity if you can drive across it and not end up in the water. And so the idea there then is that integrity, when things work the way they're supposed to, the way that they were designed to, they have wholeness and they have integrity.
And there's an important nuance here because you have an organization and you have infrastructure and you have organization, you have the way it's designed to work, and so you want workability there. But as the organization grows and evolves and changes, then the design has to change. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll say the skeleton of a 10-year-old boy is like the systems and structures. It's a 10-year-old human being. And that works for a 10-year-old boy, but you put a 20-year-old man on a 10-year-old skeleton and that's not workable. And so what you're working on is that people and organizations have integrity when they work the way they're designed to work. And as organizational leaders, we're having to continually wonder about the design, and as it grows and evolves, what kind of changes do we need to make to have a workable design?
Well, one of the assumptions that we have is that everything has a design. Right. Our relationships have a design. Right. Business has a design. The education sector, congregations have a design. Families have a design. And just like not all bridges are the same, not all those things are the same, like you said.
Exactly.
And at the same time, there is this fundamental idea that integrity means working according to the design.
And so in your organization, when one of the systems principles is that organizations get what they're designed to get, if you're not getting the results that you want, one of the things to explore is, are we living into the design? Are we working the design the way that it was the way it was intended to be? I think the other thing you look at is, have things evolved in a way that we need to redesign the systems and structures. But whether you are working in a given design or working to explore whether you're changing the design, the way you get workability is by giving and keeping your word. And so the system and structures require that certain things be done, that certain processes be engaged, that we relate to people in certain ways, that we carry out certain tasks. And our second definition of integrity, if the first one is workability, then the second one is we have integrity when we give and keep our word.
And what we're saying there is that we actually are creative with our word, that we create realities by using our words in certain ways.
We created a reality last week when we said we're going to show up here this morning on a Saturday at the studio to do this video. And so we began, based on the word that we spoke, we began to organize our schedules. We said yes to some things and no to some things. We left our houses at certain times, and we created a reality that's gotten us here to this point. And that's just like a simple illustration of really complex ways that when we give our word to, we're going to do this process in a certain way. We're going to create this structure. We're going to relate to clients or to folks who are part of our organization in a certain way. We give our word to doing that. And when we give our word, we've created an expectation. We've created a reality that then we begin to live into.
And so the big idea is that we're creating with our word by giving and keeping our word, and that is a process of integrity. When we get down to the nitty-gritty of it, what we're saying is that we do what we say we'll do when we said we would do it, in the manner or in the way that it was meant to be done.
And in my own life, I found it to be really, really helpful to memorize that. Information doesn't transform, but if you don't have the information, then you can't use it. And so, I don't hardly ever run into anybody who would say, "Oh, I don't keep my word." But when you get clear about, so if I say I'm going to meet you here to do the video, and I get here at 10 o'clock when we said we were going to do it, I get at the place that we said we were going to be, but the whole time we're here, I'm checking my text messages or my email, then I'm not doing this the way it was designed to be done. And so that definition gives you a really workable definition of what it looks like when we give and keep our word.
So when we're trying to create something and we're not creating that thing, it helps to wonder, am I doing what I said I would do? Am I doing it when I said I would do it? And am I doing it in the way it was meant to be done? And the reality is that we can't always do that. Don't hear us setting up a standard for perfection that no human beings can live into.
But let's be clear. We do believe that you can only get to integrity by giving your word. What Tricia means when she says we can't always do that, what she means is we can't always keep our word.
Yes, that's what I mean when I say that.
We can always give our word. We think that it ought to be a way of life, that the organizational life ought to be built around a system design where we give our word to doing what we said we'd do when we said we'd do it in the manner that was meant to be done. But what happens when we can't keep our word? You live big lives, things happen that you don't have any control over, breakdowns happen, you get sick. There's all kinds of things that happen. And so what happens when you give your word, but you can't keep your word?
And so when that happens, we're saying that creates a mess. And to be honest, in a lot of organizations, we are all just sitting around in the messes that we've created over days and weeks and months and years. And we wonder why we have trouble getting things done.
What that leads to is just a spirit of resignation and cynicism. This is never going to be different. Nothing's going to change. I can't count on that guy or that gal to do what they do. That's just permeates the culture.
And so what we want to say is we have to clean up our messes.
Right.
And we think that there is a way to clean up messes that we have seen over at least the last decade can be life-changing for individuals, for families, and for organizations.
And this is the second place in this presentation that this is something that I have memorized so that when I do make a mess, I have access to being able to do this. And so there's 4 pieces or parts to the honoring your word.
Yeah, and I think I would also say we're parts of organizations that do this as a regular practice. Yep. And so what we're saying here is that when we can't keep our word, we can still honor our word. We can go back and clean up the mess that was created. And we do that in a 4-fold process. And step 1 is that we just acknowledge the integrity gap. We have the humility to have the regular practice of going back and saying, I acknowledge that I gave my word and that I didn't keep my word in this way. And that does take some real humility. And, but it's a lot better than just trying to keep hustling and hope nobody noticed.
Right?
And
exactly.
that nobody will call me on that. So that's step one.
And step two is what we call getting present to the impact. Now, here's what normally happens. I come to you, I've made a mess. I say, I'm really sorry. You say, no problem.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know. We're all human. Let's just move on. And our experience is that doesn't produce much change. But if when you acknowledge you didn't keep your word, if you get present to the impact, and what we mean by that is that you actually let the person who was impacted by your not turning in the report on time, by your not following a process that you've agreed to, by not relating to people in a certain kind of way, that when you've done that, that you allow the person who was impacted by that to say what the impact was.
Yeah. And that's the part that stings.
Right.
That's the part we don't like. But that's where the magic is. For two reasons. One is we get to see what happened through their eyes. And that's important.
Very important.
Sometimes the sting of that is what helps us to change. But also they get to tell us, which is an important part of their getting over it.
Right.
Often when I see people who can't get past a mess, I think it's usually here. They're not sure that the other person is really present to the impact on them.
And in our experience with organizations, this practice of getting present to the impact is really challenging. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, if my colleague asks what the impact is, I want to actually, I mean, we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to be, we don't want to be the guy who makes it really uncomfortable for other people. But a part of what we know to be true is that if you're going to grow your capacity to get to workability, you're all going to have to grow your pain tolerance, and you're going to have to find a way to learn to practice getting present to the impact.
I want to just give a quick example.
Okay.
So what if we had done all that we did, gave our word to being here today and all the things that it took to get us here, and then I hadn't shown up?
Right.
And so then I would have, because we do follow this practice, I would have asked you.
Right.
So tell me about the impact.
Right.
You would have expected that question. And what might you have said?
Well, it could range from, if it hardly ever happened, I'd probably be pretty understanding, and we'd just figure out a way to make this work. If it was a
But you also might tell me.
I would tell you.
I got up early today.
I did. I've got some stuff going on in my life that it made me have to make a real sacrifice.
I would want you to be honest with me about that.
Yeah, and I would do that. I would do that. Though, if it wasn't a pattern, I would do that pretty gently.
Yeah.
If it was a pattern where it happened over and over, a second, a third, a fourth time, I would say things like, I feel like I can't trust you. When you do this, it feels like that the agreements we make don't really matter to you. It feels like you've disrespected my time.
Yeah.
I would say those kinds of things. And I would try to say them clearly. I'd look you in the eye, but I would also try not to say them harshly.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And we really do this, and so
it's a regular practice.
And I'm glad I got here on time today.
So you acknowledge the integrity gap. You offer heartfelt apology. You
get present to the impact,
and then you offer a heartfelt apology. Every time I hear that, I can see my brother and I as young children when my mother would say, "Apologize to your brother." Sorry, and then you move on. But when you actually realize that you have had painful, negative impact on another person, it's pretty important to get to a heartfelt apology. I'm genuinely sorry. I would never hurt you intentionally. I can see that I hurt you, and I'm just really sorry that happened. A heartfelt apology is the third part of the process.
And at that point, the apology is not premature,
right? Exactly,
like it would have been earlier.
Yeah.
And so then the fourth step is that then we just repromise. And sometimes we repromise the same thing. We give our word to the same thing as before. And maybe at this point, we're also giving our word to some other practices or learning that will help us to keep our word more effectively.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to do some learning around time management, or maybe there's some other kind of ways that I need to grow in order to be able to keep my word, and I want to take that seriously. Sometimes we alter what we gave our word to. We say, still in the process of integrity, that I shouldn't have given my word to that or in that way.
I did it because I wanted you to be pleased with me, or because I felt pressured. But when I really get away and think about this is not something that I can promise.
So this next piece is a piece that I just think has a lot of life to it.
Helps
it's
us
a lot
to get our arms around the whole integrity conversation.
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of our design, that human beings are designed to give our word to big things. And even, okay, hang with this here for a minute, even to give our word to things where we can't currently keep our word.
Right. It's true for me, and it's true for almost everybody that I know, that we are designed to create. Mm-hmm. We may not be artists, we may not be painters, or folks that we would traditionally call artists, but we are designed to create. And there's something about the sense of aliveness when we create. And so what we do is we start here, and we're trying to go over there, and we're going to have to make some promises that we currently can't keep. Mm-hmm. And that's a real counterintuitive thing. Almost everybody that I know wants to be a person who keeps their promises. Mm-hmm. And so you have to do something in yourself and in the culture of your organization to say, we're going to practice this work of making promises that we can't keep. And then as we keep them, or as we don't keep them, the honoring our word is the stuff that kind of grows us forward. It grows our capacity to give and keep our word.
Yeah, I think what happens so often is that we dream and maybe we give our word to something big and then we realize, oh, I don't know how to do this. And then we quit.
Right.
And that increases the level of cynicism in the organization.
Or the other thing that happens is we dream and we give our word and we do some things and we fail, and then we don't have anything in the culture that helps us deal with making a mess in a way that addresses the resignation and cynicism. We want to say again, the practice of honoring your word is just such a huge practice that can make such a difference in the lives of people.
It keeps us moving forward.
Exactly.
And so we want to encourage you to give your word to big things, but then to learn over time to live into that.
Exactly.
And we believe that that is part of the process of integrity. And then just the last piece, that when there are breakdowns, when there are messes, when things are not working for us or for other people, we come back to this and we look to see the places where we're not living in integrity.
And that's so hard because what we tend to want to do is to look to see who else is not integrity. Anytime there's a breakdown in a system, more than one person is contributing. Everybody is contributing. But I only have, where I have the most control is over me. And so to begin to look to where have I got an integrity gap? Where do I have a mess to clean up? What is that I ought to do to be able to restore integrity and workability is where there's a lot of leverage.
So thanks for being with us today. We'll see you next time.